Hello, everyone, and welcome to English Unpacked.
We're excited to have you here. Whether you're learning English for work, travel, studies, or everyday life, this podcast is for you.
So if I asked you to read a single, seemingly simple sentence in English out loud, and the letters O-U-G-H appeared in it 9 times, you probably assume those 4 letters make, a consistent sound.
Right. I mean, logically, you would.
Yeah, but you'd be entirely wrong.
Yeah.
You would actually have to pronounce those exact same 4 letters 9 completely different ways.
It's honestly a nightmare for anyone learning the language.
It really is. Listen to this sentence and pay attention to every time I hit an O-U-G-H word. Okay, here goes. A rough-coated, dough-faced, thoughtful plowman strode through the streets of Scarborough. After falling into a slough, he coughed and hiccuped.
Wow. Yeah, that really highlights it.
Right. Rough, dough, thoughtful, plowman, through, Scarborough, slough, coughed, hiccuped. 9 completely distinct phonetic sounds from the exact same 4-letter spelling. Anyway, welcome to the deep dive.
It is, it's absolute linguistic anarchy, and I think it perfectly encapsulates this illusion we all labor under when we use this language every day.
What do you mean by illusion?
Well, we expect our daily tools to be engineered with, precision and logic. But the English language is not some sleek, perfectly designed machine.
Not at all.
It's more like a hoarder's house where every room is decorated with furniture from a completely different century. But somehow, the medieval foundation is still holding the whole structure together.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission today is to figure out exactly how this architectural marvel or disaster, depending on how you look at it, actually came to be.
It's a messy history.
Very messy. We're going to trace the origins, the evolution, and the really bizarre internal mechanics of English. And honestly, whether you're a native speaker who has used these words your entire life without a second thought, or you are, in the trenches learning it as a second language right now, by the end of our time today, you will never look at a simple sentence the same way again.
Yeah, because to really understand the mechanics of English and why we have absurdities like 9 pronunciations for O-U-G-H, we have to stop treating it like a fixed set of academic rules.
Right, it's not a math equation.
Exactly. We have to look at it as a living organism. One that has survived military invasions, outlasted massive empires, and somehow mutated its way through multiple technological revolutions.
But before we dig into the mud of the 5th century, I think we need to calibrate our understanding of just how massive this organism is today.
The scale is definitely important context.
It's almost difficult to wrap your head around. I mean, if we look at the raw data, there are over 400 million native speakers of English worldwide.
Which is a huge number, but
that number, while large, doesn't actually tell the real story. Because there are over 1 billion more people who speak it as a second language.
And that distinction, the one between native and non-native, is the crucial metric here.
How so?
Well, if we look purely at native speakers, English isn't actually the most spoken language. It sits in 3rd place, trailing significantly behind Mandarin and Spanish.
Oh, wow. 3rd place.
Yeah. But when you look at the total aggregate, combining native and non-native speakers, it is arguably the most widely utilized language on the planet.
It's what linguists call a lingua franca.
Precisely.
But what does that actually mean in practice for you and me? It means if 2 commercial airline pilots from entirely different linguistic backgrounds, say a pilot from Japan and an air traffic controller in Brazil, if they need to communicate to land a plane safely, the default language they're globally mandated to use over the radio is English.
Right. It's the default language for international business, telecommunications, scientific publishing, diplomacy, everything.
Which brings up a fascinating point about how we measure the power of a language.
Yeah, its power isn't found in the elegance of its grammar or the logic of its spelling, obviously. The power of English lies entirely in its utility.
Just getting the job done.
Exactly. The historical shift of this highly localized, highly specific tongue spoken by a few tribes on a rainy island, transforming into a global lingua franca, is completely historically unprecedented. It is the ultimate bridge language.
It really is like the world's default open source operating system.
I like that analogy.
It's installed everywhere, it's constantly being updated by billions of users simultaneously, and frankly, it is full of buggy legacy code that no one has the time or authorization to delete.
It just functions despite the bugs.
Right. And what's wild is how organically this operating system installs itself. Consider the United States, the country that arguably exports more English language culture, media, and software to the globe than any other entity.
Right. The cultural dominance is massive.
But until as recently as 2017, English was not actually the official language of the USA at the federal level.
Wait, really? At the federal level, there was no official language?
Yep. It's a brilliant example of how language operates entirely independently of state control.
That makes sense. I mean, several individual U.S. states had declared it their official language, and obviously it functioned as the de facto language of the government and populace.
Yeah, everyone used it, but the federal government simply didn't have it locked into law as the singular national language.
Which demonstrates that a language doesn't need a strict top-down government mandate to anchor itself and dominate a culture.
It spreads through commerce, through culture, and just sheer practical necessity. It absorbs everything in its path.
It really does.
But I want to wind the clock back now. Because this massive global operating system did not start out as a global enterprise.
No, it had very humble and very violent beginnings.
Exactly. It started with a power vacuum and a violent invasion in the 5th century AD.
So to trace the architecture of the language, we have to start at a very specific geopolitical moment. For centuries, the Roman Empire had occupied the British Isles.
Right. They brought the roads, the aqueducts, the whole deal.
They built roads, established governance, and crucially, they brought Latin. But the Roman Empire eventually began to collapse inward, and around the year 436 AD, the Roman legions completed their withdrawal from Britain to protect Rome itself.
They just packed up and left.
Completely abandoned the province.
And when a superpower leaves a territory like that, it leaves a massive vacuum. And stepping right into that void were 3 Germanic tribes.
The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes.
Where were they coming from exactly?
They crossed the treacherous North Sea from what we now recognize as Denmark and northern Germany, and they systematically invaded the eastern and southern coasts of Britain.
Now, the local inhabitants of the island at that time, they weren't speaking English yet, right?
No, they were speaking Celtic languages.
But those native Celtic speakers didn't stand a chance against this organized influx. This wasn't a peaceful migration we're talking about. This was displacement.
Exactly. The invasion was profound and brutal. The native Celtic speakers were steadily pushed outward, forced to the rugged western and northern fringes of the islands.
Into the geographic areas we now know as Wales, Scotland, and Ireland.
Right. And the invaders set up camp, bringing their West Germanic languages with them.
And this is where we get the name itself, right?
Yes, the Angles specifically hailed from a region called Angleland, and the language they spoke was called Englisk.
Which is the direct etymological root of England and English.
Exactly. So right there, the foundational DNA of the language is firmly set.
It belongs to the West Germanic group of the Indo-European language family. It is not Latin. It is not Celtic. It is stubbornly Germanic.
Which brings us to the era of Old English, which stretches roughly from 450 to 1100 AD.
And we need to be very clear here for anyone listening. If you were magically transported back to an alehouse in 800 AD England, you would not be able to order a drink.
No, you would have absolutely no idea what anyone was saying.
Like the text of a famous poem from this era, Beowulf, it looks and sounds like entirely foreign, guttural syllables.
Native English speakers today cannot read or understand Old English without intense academic study. It sounds more like German or Dutch than modern English.
But here is what I find so fascinating about that. Despite it sounding completely alien to our modern ears, the absolute core of our daily vocabulary survived this era intact.
It's the bedrock of the language.
Yeah, about half of the most frequently used words in modern English today have direct Old English roots. Words like be, strong, water, earth.
It makes perfect sense when you look at the mechanics of linguistic survival. I mean, which words survive 1,000 years of history?
The important ones.
Right, the words that represent the fundamental utilities of daily human existence. The sky, the dirt, the water, strength, existence itself. The foundational building blocks of human survival form the skeleton of the language.
But then, that sturdy Germanic skeleton gets completely shattered.
Oh, absolutely fractured.
The year is 1066.
Mm-hmm.
William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy from modern-day France, crosses the Channel, wins the Battle of Hastings, and conquers England.
This is perhaps the single most disruptive linguistic event in the history of English.
Because they didn't just bring swords, they brought a dictionary.
Right. The Norman conquerors didn't just bring new laws, they brought a completely new language, a dialect of Old French. Almost overnight, French becomes the exclusive language of the royal court, the ruling classes, the justice system, and all high-level business.
Which establishes this incredible socioeconomic dynamic. We get a strict linguistic class division.
A massive divide.
You have the lower classes, the commoners and peasants who are actually working the muddy land, and they're still speaking Germanic Old English.
Yeah.
But the upper classes, the nobility living in the stone castles, are speaking French.
And that class divide is the exact mechanism that explains why English has such a bizarrely massive, redundant vocabulary today.
I love this part.
It is why we constantly have two completely different words for the exact same underlying concept. You have the blunt, utilitarian Germanic word used by the peasants, and the refined, sophisticated French word used by the nobility.
Right. The classic example of this is livestock versus meat on the plate.
Oh, it's the perfect example.
If you are an English-speaking peasant, you are out in the field raising a cow, a pig, or a sheep. Those are all Germanic words.
Because you're dealing with the dirt and the animal itself.
Exactly. But once that animal is slaughtered, cooked, and served on a silver platter to the Norman lord in the castle, it becomes beef from the French boeuf.
Or pork from the French pork.
And mutton from mouton. The peasants knew the living animal. The lords only knew the cooked meat.
It perfectly illustrates the power dynamics of language. The vocabulary of law, government, and art became heavily French. Words like justice, jury, parliament, sovereign, beauty, romance.
So all the fancy stuff.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the vocabulary of labor, earth, and basic emotion remains stubbornly Germanic.
But wait, if the Normans completely conquered the island, and French was the language of all money, power, and law for centuries, why didn't English just die out entirely?
It's a great question.
Like, why didn't the Germanic tongues suffer the exact same fate as the Celtic languages before it?
It largely comes down to sheer demographic gravity and, honestly, a bit of historical luck.
Demographics.
Yeah, the vast, overwhelming majority of the population, the thousands of commoners, never stopped speaking English. While the lords spoke French to each other, the daily mechanical operations of the entire island still ran on English.
And what was the historical luck part?
Well, you had events like the Black Death in the 14th century, which disproportionately wiped out the cloistered clergy and the educated classes who spoke Latin and French.
Oh, wow. So a tragic plague actually helped save the English language.
In a grim way, yes. It dramatically increased the social and economic leverage of the English-speaking labor class. There were fewer workers, so their value went up, and their language gained prominence.
So the language essentially bubbled up from the bottom.
It did.
It absorbed thousands of French words into its vocabulary, but it kept its core Germanic grammar, creating what we call Middle English.
Precisely. The lines eventually blurred.
Yeah.
And we can actually anchor this to specific historical milestones.
Like what?
Well, in 1348, English finally replaces Latin as the primary language of instruction in schools.
That's a huge step.
And then a monumental shift in 1362. The Statute of Pleading is passed. This meant English officially replaced French as the language of the law courts. It is used in Parliament for the very first time.
English had clawed its way back to the throne.
It really had.
And this is the Middle English era. This is the language that Geoffrey Chaucer uses when he writes the Canterbury Tales in the late 1300s.
Yes.
And while it is much closer to what we speak today, it would still sound incredibly bizarre to us, right?
Very bizarre. The vocabulary had expanded massively with all those French words, but the way they physically pronounced the words was entirely different than how we do it now.
Which sets the stage for one of the most chaotic collisions in linguistic history.
Oh, this is where it gets really crazy.
As we transition into early modern English, roughly from 1500 to 1800, two massive opposing forces slam into each other. A biological shift in how humans spoke, and the technological invention that froze words in time.
You are talking about the Great Vowel Shift colliding with the printing press.
Yes, the Great Vowel Shift.
Around 1400, a sudden, rapid mutation in pronunciation just swept across the English-speaking population.
But what does that actually mean mechanically?
Yeah.
How does a whole population just decide to shift their vowels?
Well, it wasn't a conscious decision at all. It was an organic, phonetic drift.
Like an accent changing over time.
Exactly, but very rapidly. Mechanically speaking, speakers began articulating their long vowels higher up and further forward in their mouths. The sounds became shorter and tighter.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So, a word that used to be pronounced whose, rhyming with boost, shifted to become house. Boat shifted to boot. The actual physical sound of the spoken language was in a state of rapid fluid metamorphosis.
And right in the middle of this massive biological audio shift, a man named William Caxton drops a technological bomb on London.
The printing press.
In 1476, he establishes the first English printing press. And we really cannot overstate the impact of the printing press here.
It changed everything. Before Caxton, every single book or document was painstakingly written out by hand by scribes. And if a scribe in the north of England thought a word should be spelled one way based on his local accent, he just spelled it that way. There was no standardized spelling.
But the printing press is a physical machine.
It is.
It requires literal wooden and metal blocks, typeset letters, to be arranged in a frame, inked, and pressed onto paper. The mechanics of the machine demanded standardization.
Because you can't have 5 different spellings for the same word when you are physically locking lead letters into a grid. You have to pick one spelling and stick with it.
And here is the absolute tragedy of English spelling. Caxton and the early printers locked in the physical spellings of words while the great vowel shift was still happening.
It's so frustrating to think about.
They standardized the written word based on how things used to be pronounced, just as the population was changing how they actually pronounced them.
Right. It's exactly like taking a photograph of someone right in the middle of a sneeze.
Yes.
We permanently froze the visual spelling of the language on the printed page, while the spoken audio of the language was in the middle of a massive mutation.
That is the fundamental mechanism behind why our spelling makes absolutely no sense today. We are looking at the spelling of the 1400s, but applying the pronunciation of the 2100s.
It's a profound disconnect between orthography and phonetics, and honestly, it raises a really interesting question about power.
What kind of power?
Well, who actually decided which dialect became the standard printed English? I mean, why do we spell things the way Londoners did rather than the way people in York or Cornwall did?
Because London is where the money was.
Pure capitalism.
Yeah.
Exactly. It wasn't because the London dialect was grammatically superior or more poetic or anything.
Right, it's not like they had a linguistic summit.
No, London was simply the commercial and political hub. It was where the publishing houses were physically located. The dialect of the East Midlands and London became standard English purely due to the logistics of commerce and the concentration of the printing presses.
That is incredible. So the spelling is locked in by capitalism.
Essentially, yes.
And as these presses churned out cheaper books, the democratization of language began. Literacy rates climbed. The Renaissance brought a renewed interest in classical learning, which meant scholars were suddenly flooding the language with massive amounts of Latin and Greek terms for science, philosophy, and art.
The vocabulary was expanding so rapidly that people felt a desperate need to categorize it, to apply some kind of logic to the chaos.
Which gives us the dictionary.
Exactly. This era birthed the dictionary. Robert Cowdery published the first English dictionary in 1604, but it was Samuel Johnson's monumental dictionary in 1755 that truly attempted to catalog and enforce the boundaries of the language.
And we are moving right through the era of Shakespeare, born in 1564. The language he was utilizing, inventing thousands of words, playing with grammar, writing Hamlet and Macbeth, that is early modern English.
And he cemented the foundation for everything that followed. Shakespeare demonstrated the true elasticity of English.
How so?
He proved that this language could accommodate high art, deep philosophy, and body humor simultaneously. The foundation was now securely laid. The spelling was frozen by technology, the vocabulary was enriched by the Renaissance, and the grammar was stabilizing.
So English was ready for its next, and arguably most aggressive, phase.
Global domination.
Moving into late modern English, roughly from 1800 to the present day. If early modern English was about standardizing the language at home, late modern English is about setting sail and absorbing the world.
And the defining characteristic of late modern English is an absolute explosion in vocabulary. I mean, unprecedented growth.
And there are two distinct, massive engines driving this expansion, right?
Yes. The first is the Industrial Revolution.
Right, because suddenly humanity is inventing things that literally did not exist before. Steam engines, electricity, telecommunications, mass manufacturing.
You can't use a medieval Germanic word to describe a combustion engine.
No, you definitely can't. The language had to invent entirely new frameworks of terminology just to keep up with the technology.
And the second engine was geopolitical dominance. The British Empire.
The empire on which the sun never sets.
Exactly. At its zenith, the empire covered roughly 1/4 of the Earth's landmass. The English language wasn't just sitting on its rainy island anymore. It was being forced into contact with thousands of different cultures, ecosystems, and languages globally.
And as it made contact, it didn't just impose itself. It acted like a linguistic sponge.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about English being a hoarder's house.
Yeah.
Well, the British Empire was the era where English went global antiquing. The amount of loanwords we took from other cultures is just staggering.
Though, the term loanword is a bit of a polite fiction, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. We didn't borrow these words with any intention of giving them back. We assimilated them.
We did. And the mechanics of this assimilation are fascinating. Consider how seamlessly foreign words are integrated into our daily routines today.
I actually want to read a list of some of these origins because it maps out the empire's trade routes and global interactions perfectly. Listen to where the mundane words in your house actually come from. From Arabic, we assimilated mattress and algebra.
Right.
From Turkish, we took tulip and jackal. Persian gave us bazaar and caravan. Hindi provided shampoo and dungarees.
Let's pause on shampoo for a moment because that's a great story.
Oh, please.
It comes from the Hindi word champo, which meant to massage or press. As British colonialists in India experienced this grooming practice, they didn't invent a new English word for it. They simply took the phonetic sound of the Hindi word, anglicized the spelling slightly to fit the printing press rules, and locked it into the English vocabulary.
It is brilliant efficiency. Why make up a word when you can just steal one? The list goes on, too. We took fjord and ski from Norwegian. We took kayak and igloo from Eskimo Aleut languages. Spanish contributed mosquito and siesta. Italian gave us soprano and casino.
What is truly remarkable is the grammatical architecture that allows this to happen. A speaker today can say, I'm going to take a siesta on my mattress before playing an algebra game on my computer.
Right.
And they are seamlessly weaving together Spanish, Arabic, and Latin derivatives without violating a single rule of English syntax.
Which honestly makes me wonder, if our nouns are Arabic, our legal terms are French, our scientific terms are Greek, and our grooming terms are Hindi, at what point does English stop being a Germanic language?
It's a very valid question, but it goes back to the difference between the skeleton and the flesh.
The skeleton and the flesh.
Yeah, the vocabulary, the flesh of the language is incredibly diverse and constantly shedding and regrowing. But the grammatical skeleton, the way we conjugate basic verbs, the way we structure a sentence with a subject and a predicate, the syntax, the core structural rules, that remains definitively, stubbornly West Germanic.
So English is a Germanic house heavily decorated with foreign artifacts.
Beautifully said. Yes.
And as the empire expanded, it wasn't just bringing words back to London. It was leaving speakers all over the globe, which caused the language to fracture into distinct, massive regional varieties.
And the most influential of these global branches, American English, has a history that completely defies common sense.
The evolution of American English is a perfect case study in how physical geographic isolation dictates linguistic development. It effectively begins with the establishment of Jamestown in 1607, the first permanent English settlement in North America.
Right.
Now, most people instinctively assume that British English is the original, pure form of the language, and that American English is this newer, corrupted deviation.
That's a very common misconception.
But the mechanics of isolation actually produce the exact opposite effect in several ways. American English functions like a linguistic time capsule.
Exactly. When those early colonists crossed the Atlantic, they took the English of the early 1600s with them. But they were separated by an ocean from the rapid, continuous linguistic changes, trends, and phonetic drifts that were happening back in London.
Because there's no internet, there's no phones, they're completely cut off.
Because they were physically isolated, they preserved aspects of the language that were eventually discarded or evolved away in Britain.
So in a very real sense, American English is actually closer to the English of Shakespeare than modern British English is.
In terms of certain specific vocabulary choices and phonetic traits, yes, absolutely. It's a phenomenon linguists call colonial lag.
Colonial lag, I like that.
There are numerous expressions today that modern British speakers will confidently dismiss as modern Americanisms, completely unaware that these are actually original British expressions.
Give me some examples of these frozen words. What did America keep in the linguistic fridge?
A prime example is the word trash to mean refuse or rubbish.
Wait, trash is originally British?
It is, or using the word loan as a verb instead of lend. Or using the word fall to describe the season between summer and winter rather than autumn.
That's crazy.
These are not recent American inventions. These are documented, centuries-old British expressions. America simply kept using them, while Britain eventually shifted to preferring rubbish, lend, and autumn.
That is wild. But obviously, American English didn't just sit frozen in time forever. It
Oh.
was colliding with entirely new landscapes and entirely different cultures here on the continent.
Right. The Spanish had a massive, profound influence on the American vocabulary, specifically through the expansion into the American West.
Because the frontier necessitated new vocabulary.
Exactly. The American landscape and the existing Spanish colonial presence provided it. Words that we consider inherently American, like canyon, ranch, stampede, tornado, and vigilante, are direct adoptions from Spanish.
We also absorbed French influence via the Louisiana Territory, and we definitely must acknowledge the deep linguistic impact of West African languages brought over through the horrific mechanisms of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes, words like banjo and gumbo and profound influences on the cadence and syntax of American dialects are rooted there. The American dialect is its own complex hoarder's house.
And the flow of language is never just one-directional. While America was evolving its dialect, technology eventually closed the geographic gap. There's a fascinating cycle of reimportation that occurs in the 20th century.
Right, because suddenly America isn't physically isolated anymore. It has a new printing press, Hollywood.
The movies.
The cinema and later television allowed American English to be broadcast globally, effectively exporting the American dialect back to the British motherland.
Do we have an example of that reimportation?
The term frame-up, meaning to falsely accuse someone, is a great example.
Like framing someone for a crime.
Exactly. It was an expression that evolved in the United States, but it was heavily popularized and re-imported into British English via the global popularity of American gangster films in the 1930s. Cultural export became the modern equivalent of naval expansion.
And we should note that America is just one massive branch on this tree. You have Australian English, New Zealand English, Canadian, South African, Indian, and Caribbean English.
A vast tapestry.
Each of these varieties took that stubborn Germanic skeleton and dressed it up in their own unique local history, indigenous borrowings, and phonetic shifts.
However, the outsized influence of American English today is undeniable. It is driven purely by the USA's current dominance in cinema, popular music, international trade, and crucially, the foundational architecture of the internet. The digital world was largely coded in American English.
Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of this deep dive.
Oh, the trivia.
Yes, because we have traced this chaotic history, the Germanic tribes, the French ruling class, the mechanical constraints of the printing press, the global antiquing of the empire, the geographic isolation of America.
It's a lot.
It is. And all those historical forces have left us with the current mechanics of English. A language full of bizarre rules, visual paradoxes, and mind-boggling trivia.
The physical quirks of the language today are quite literally the visible scars of its history. When you look closely at how the language operates on a micro level, you see the fingerprints of every era we just discussed.
Let's transition from the mechanical limitations of the 15th century printing press to the mechanical limitations of the 19th century typewriter.
QWERTY.
Yes. Look down at the keyboard sitting in front of you right now. Whether it is on a sleek laptop or a touchscreen smartphone, the layout of the letters is almost certainly QWERTY. Q-W-E-R-T-Y.
It's universal.
But why? Why aren't the letters just in alphabetical order?
It's a stunning example of legacy mechanics dictating modern behavior. When the first mechanical typewriters were invented, the letters were actually arranged alphabetically.
Okay, so what went wrong?
There is a physical problem. The metal arms that swung up to strike the ink ribbon would frequently clash and jam together if you typed adjacent letters too quickly.
Oh, so the machine couldn't handle the speed of the typist.
Precisely. So, Christopher Latham Scholes, the inventor of the early typewriter, engineered a solution. He redesigned the keyboard layout specifically to separate the most commonly used letter pairings in the English language. He scattered the vowels and common consonants across the board to force the typist's fingers to travel further, thereby slowing down the typing speed just enough to prevent the mechanical metal rods from jamming.
That is insane.
Yeah.
We are literally typing on a layout that was explicitly designed to slow us down, to accommodate the physical limitations of 19th century metal sticks.
Yep.
And even though we type on digital glass screens today with zero risk of mechanical jamming, we still use the QWERTY layout. Why?
Because the legacy code is so deeply ingrained in the global population that it is economically and practically impossible to overhaul it.
It's the perfect metaphor for the English spelling system itself. We know it is inefficient. We know it doesn't make logical sense anymore.
But the collective effort required to relearn a new logical system is a barrier we simply refuse to cross. We prefer the comfortable chaos.
Speaking of the letters we are typing on that QWERTY board, let's look at the basic anatomy. The most common letter utilized in the English language is E, which naturally makes it the most common vowel. The most common consonant is R, followed very closely by T. And there is a strict, unbreakable rule regarding the architecture of a syllable in English.
Yes. Every single syllable in the English language must contain a vowel sound. It is the phonetic engine of the syllable.
Right.
However, interestingly, not all syllables require a consonant. You can have a functional syllable composed entirely of a vowel, but you cannot have one composed solely of consonants.
And as we type those syllables, we are constantly using symbols that we rarely think about. For instance, the little dot hovering over the lowercase I and j. It isn't just a stray mark. It has a specific anatomical name.
I love this one. It is called a superscript dot, or tittle.
A tittle. And many of the symbols we use daily suffer from an identity crisis, possessing multiple names depending on the context.
The hashtag symbol is a prime example of that.
Right. On a telephone, it is the pound sign. In computer programming or social media, it is the hash or hashtag. In older mathematics or accounting, it is simply the number sign.
And the @ symbol, which is ubiquitous in emails, is most commonly just referred to as the @ sign or the @ symbol.
But I want to look at the word alphabet itself. We talked about English borrowing words, but alphabet is arguably the most literal, unimaginative theft in the entire dictionary.
It is a direct, unvarnished borrowing from Greek.
Yeah. If you look at the Greek alphabet, the first two letters are alpha and beta. The English language simply smashed those two Greek letters together, dropped the phonetic ending, and declared the entire system an alphabet.
It's like naming the number system the 1, 2.
Exactly. And we didn't just steal from Greek. The mechanics of our board games are imported as well. The phrase checkmate in chess, it sounds like a completely English construct. Check your mate.
But it has absolutely nothing to do with those English words.
What's the real origin?
It is a phonetic corruption of the Persian phrase shahmat. In Persian, shah means king, and mat means helpless or defeated. The king is helpless.
Ah, that makes so much more sense.
Right. When the game of chess migrated through trade routes into Europe, English speakers heard shahmat, butchered the pronunciation until it sounded like the English words check and mate, and permanently locked the misunderstanding into the lexicon.
That is the linguistic blender at work right there.
Yeah.
Let's look up at the sky for a moment, because there is a cosmic piece of trivia that ties perfectly back to our discussion about the Germanic versus Roman influence.
Oh, the planets.
Think about the planets in our solar system. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. What do they all have in common?
They are all named after mythological deities, specifically from Roman and Greek pantheons.
Every single one of them. Except for one, Earth.
Yeah.
Our own planet is the only one in the solar system not named after a Greco-Roman god. Why? Because Earth is a deeply rooted Germanic word. It derives from Old English and Old High German words simply meaning ground or soil.
It's amazing.
While the scientists and astronomers in the Renaissance were busy naming the distant planets using their fancy classical Latin terms, the common people were still using their foundational Germanic word for the dirt under their feet.
It perfectly illustrates the linguistic divide we talked about earlier. The distant academic concepts get the Latin treatment, while the immediate tangible reality remains Germanic.
I want to dive into spelling oddities now, because this is where the language actively feels like a puzzle designed to frustrate you.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's test the constraints of the spelling system. There are only two words in common English usage today that end in the letters gry.
They describe two very fundamental and often overlapping human conditions.
Hangry.
Well, close. Angry and hungry.
Correct. Now, how about the architecture of repeated letters? Let's look at the word bookkeeper. B-O-O-K-K-E-P-E-R.
That's a strange one to look at.
It is the only unhyphenated word in the English language containing three consecutive sets of double letters, double O, double K, double E.
And, you know, the mechanics of visual processing usually reject that kind of repetition.
What do you mean?
Well, if you look at a word like sweet-toothed, it technically has consecutive double letters, but our brains require a hyphen in the middle just to break up the visual clutter so we can actually read it. Bookkeeper somehow slipped past the visual gatekeepers.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the word uncopyrightable.
Oh, the anagrammatic anomaly?
Yes, it is the longest English word in normal use that contains absolutely no repeating letters. Every single letter in that long word appears exactly once.
And then we have the strange case of the word dreamt.
I've always wondered about this one.
It is a variant past tense spelling of dream, But alongside its negative undreamt, it stands utterly alone in the language. It is the only word in the entire English lexicon that ends with the consonant cluster mosnail.
Why does it exist? If we normally just add ate-ed to make a past tense, like dreamed, why do we have this bizarre empty ending?
It is likely a survivor of older Germanic irregular verb conjugations that resisted the standardization process. While most verbs surrendered and adopted the standard ade suffix, dreamt stubbornly held on to its archaic phonetic clipping. It is a tiny, localized rebellion against standardized grammar.
And speaking of resisting standards, let's look at the word rhythm. R-H-Y-T-H-M.
A great word.
It holds the record for being the longest English word without a true vowel meaning. It completely lacks an A, E, I, O, or U.
Yeah.
It relies entirely on the Y acting as a phonetic vowel substitute to string together a chaotic jumble of consonants.
There are also highly exclusive clubs within the vocabulary. For instance, the alidus suffix. There are thousands of adjectives in English, but there are only 4 words in common use that end in the exact letters D-O-U-S.
Oh, I know these. Give me a second. They are hazardous, horrendous, stupendous, and tremendous.
Precisely. And the mechanism behind this exclusivity is fascinating. These words weren't built using normal English suffix rules.
Where did they come from?
They were imported almost fully intact from Latin words ending in osus or endus. The English spelling system just adapted them slightly and then effectively closed the door, rarely applying that specific endus ending to newly formed words.
The deeper we go, the more it feels like a patchwork quilt. And we can't talk about grammar without addressing some of the internal contradictions.
The plurals are the best example of that.
Yes, plurals. We have this bizarre category of words that only exist in the plural form. Think about items of clothing or tools. Trousers, jeans, pants, pajamas, glasses, binoculars, scissors, shears, tongs.
The underlying logic is that these items are traditionally composed of 2 identical connected parts. 2 legs of a pant, 2 lenses of a glass, 2 blades of a scissor.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the language grammatically treats the single object as a plural entity. You cannot hand someone a single scissor.
But the rules immediately bend the moment you change the word's function in a sentence.
Right.
If I am talking about the pocket on my pants, I don't call it a trousers pocket. Suddenly it becomes singular. I call it a trouser pocket.
That is because its syntactic role has shifted. It is no longer functioning as the primary noun. It is acting as a modifier, an adjective describing the pocket.
And adjectives don't take plurals.
Exactly. In English, adjectives generally do not take plural forms. The grammar is highly contextual. The rules shift depending on the job the word is performing in that exact moment.
And we also bend rules when we need to invent entirely new concepts. We don't just borrow words from Hindi or Arabic anymore. We actively cannibalize our own vocabulary.
We chop words up and sew them together to create what linguists call a blend or a portmanteau.
Right. Now, how is a blend different from a compound word?
A blend is fundamentally different. A compound word takes 2 fully intact words and pushes them together without losing any architectural integrity. Think of website, blackboard, or darkroom. Both original words remain complete.
But a blend is violent. You are amputating parts of words and fusing the remaining stumps together.
A visceral but accurate analogy. Brunch is a classic blend. The front half of breakfast fused to the back half of lunch.
I love brunch.
Motel is motor car plus hotel. Guesstimate is guess plus estimate. The language allows for this kind of modular linguistic surgery because its foundational grammar is so flexible.
Let's talk about sentence extremes.
Yeah.
If we strip English down to its absolute bare minimum, the shortest grammatically complete sentence in the language is just 2 words.
I am.
I am. It contains a subject and a verb. It expresses a complete, profound philosophical thought in just 3 letters.
Conversely, if you want to ensure you are utilizing the entire mechanical spectrum of the language, you write a pangram.
A pangram. That's a sentence designed specifically to contain every single letter of the alphabet at least once.
Yes.
The most famous one, the one we all typed in elementary school computer class, is "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog."
And we use that not because it's great literature, but because it was the ultimate mechanical diagnostic test.
Oh, like for the typewriters.
Exactly. If you were testing a newly built typewriter or the newly coded digital keyboard, typing that one sentence guaranteed that every single mechanical rod or digital input was functioning correctly.
That makes total sense. But my absolute favorite word puzzle, the one that truly shows how dense English orthography can be, involves the word therein. Therein.
It's a great party trick.
It is a 7-letter word, but if you read it from left to right without rearranging a single letter, you can extract 10 completely separate, legitimate English words.
It is a remarkable quirk of how our common letter pairings overlap. Walk us through the extraction.
Okay, let's look closely at the word T-H-E-R-E-I-N. First, you have the first three letters, the,
Right.
then the first five, there. Now look at letters 2 and 3. He, letters 6 and 7, in. Letters 4, 5, 6, 7, rain.
Yep, keep it going.
Letters 2, 3, 4, her. Letters 2, 3, 4, here. Letters 3, 4, 5, air. Like the poetic word for before. Then the full word itself, therein. And finally, if you take letters 2 through 7, herein, 10 words hiding inside a 7-letter Russian nesting doll.
It perfectly illustrates how much data we pack into such small phonetic spaces. But if we want to talk about the absolute pinnacle of grammatical brain teasers, we have to confront the sentence with the 7 that's.
Oh man, I was hoping we could avoid this.
We have to do it.
This is the ultimate proof that English grammar is a beautiful, chaotic hallucination. The claim is that there is a sentence containing the exact same word, the word that 7 times in a row, and it still remains perfectly grammatically valid.
It is completely valid. It is difficult to process orally, but structurally it obeys every law of English syntax.
I am going to try to read it exactly as written. Deep breath. It is true for all that refers to is not the same that refers to.
You survive.
My brain is actively rejecting what I just said. It sounds like a scratched CD skipping. How does that possibly make logical sense?
It makes sense because the word that is the ultimate multi-tool in the English language. It refuses to be confined to a single grammatical category. Depending on its exact placement, that can function as a pronoun, a conjunction, a determiner, a noun, and a relative pronoun.
So the sentence is essentially rapidly switching the function of the word back and forth with every single beat.
Precisely. To understand the mechanism, we have to translate the sentence into simpler terms, substituting different words for the various that's. The core meaning of the sentence is this. It is true, despite everything you just said, that this specific word to which this word refers is not the same word to which this other word refers.
Okay, let's break down the actual grammar tree. Save me from the 7 that's.
Let's parse the first cluster. It is true for all that. The first that is a pronoun meaning, despite all of that context.
Got it.
Next, we have the second that, which is a conjunction introducing the main clause. Then we hit a dense pair. That. The third that is a determiner, a pointing word, like saying this cup. And the fourth that is actually acting as a noun. It is the literal word that being discussed in quotes.
So it's pointing at the word itself. That specific word that.
Exactly. Then the fifth that is a relative pronoun meaning which. The sixth is another determiner pointing again to the seventh, which is the noun.
It's dizzying.
So when you diagram it, it alternates. Pointer, noun, connector, pointer, noun. The grammar holds up flawlessly, even though the vocabulary choices are designed to deliberately overload your cognitive processing.
It is the linguistic equivalent of an optical illusion. The structure is sound, but your brain can't easily perceive it. And frankly, trying to untangle sentences like that might induce a phobia, which naturally English has specific terrifying words for.
Oh, the phobias.
Yes, if you develop an irrational fear of the number 13, you suffer from triskaidekaphobia.
And if that fear is hyper-specifically tethered to Friday the 13th, the diagnostic term expands to paraskevitic heterophobia.
A word so dense it practically triggers its own phobia. And it highlights exactly what we discussed about Greek and Latin influence. We didn't use Germanic roots to build a word like fear of Friday the 13th. We let scholars meticulously construct this massive, imposing clinical term out of ancient Greek building blocks just to categorize as superstition.
Because Latin and Greek carry the weight of academic authority in the English operating system.
So as we pull back from all of this, from the Roman withdrawal to the Norman lords eating beef, from Caxton's wooden printing press to Scholl's jamming typewriters, from Hindi shampoo to the 7, the atolls, what is the grand takeaway for you, the listener, trying to master or simply appreciate this language?
If we synthesize this entire journey, the fundamental realization must be that English is not a pure, sterile, mathematically designed system. It is a deeply human, historical tapestry.
Beautifully said.
Its resilience doesn't come from rigid rules. Its resilience comes from its unparalleled willingness to compromise. It survived because it was willing to absorb the vocabulary of its French conquerors. It expanded because it was willing to assimilate the words of the global cultures it encountered. It is an incredibly flexible, adaptable framework.
And I think that is the most beautiful, empowering part of this whole deep dive. Every single time you open your mouth to speak, every time you type a quick email on a QWERTY keyboard designed to slow down metal rods,
Hmm?
every time you use a mundane word like shampoo or ranch or mattress, you are actively participating in thousands of years of violent, messy, brilliant human history.
Absolutely.
You aren't just communicating, you are wielding an artifact that has survived plagues, won wars, crossed oceans, and frozen time.
You are breathing life into an ancient, ever-evolving organism. It is a privilege to use it.
And that leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We know that in the 15th century, the mechanical printing press permanently froze our spelling mid-mutation. We know that in the 20th century, the American Empire exported its frontier vocabulary back to the world through the technology of cinema.
Right.
But think about the very moment we are living in right now. Think about the internet. We are currently part of a massive digital global network that forces us to communicate instantly across borders using text, shorthand, emojis, and rapidly mutating memes.
The landscape is changing so fast.
Are we at this exact second living through a new, invisible great vowel shift? Are we fundamentally altering the mechanics of the language again?
The acceleration of language change in the digital space is unprecedented. The architecture is shifting beneath our feet right now.
Right, so ask yourself, in 500 years, will the English that you and I are speaking today sound as bizarre, as guttural, as completely foreign to our descendants as the Old English of Beowulf sounds to us right now?
If the history of this language teaches us anything, it is that survival requires mutation. It is almost guaranteed.
It is wild to think about. That sleek, perfectly engineered machine we imagined at the beginning of the show, it doesn't exist. The messy, cobbled-together hoarder's house of history is the whole point. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. Keep questioning the tools you use every day, pay attention to the echoes of history in your sentences, and keep exploring the incredible, chaotic world hiding inside your own vocabulary. We will catch you on the next deep dive.